Follow along as I discuss a new battery technology that allows for lower cost, faster charging, more energy-dense batteries, which paves the way for more affordable, longer-range electric vehicles. And this is a true breakthrough because it is actually available today, and it's not an unproven technology that may never see the light of day. So stick around because you're not going to want to miss this one. I'm John, and this is Cleanerwatt. Many of the technology breakthroughs that you hear about in a video or say on the news are unproven and rarely see the light of day. When it actually comes to commercializing those tech breakthroughs, often they never make it to commercialization. However, that is not the case with this new silicon battery technology. Paraclete Energy's revolutionary new silicon anode material is available today, and it appears to be a true breakthrough in battery technology. Their website states that the product is currently being mass-produced, albeit the company does appear to be quite small right now, but nonetheless, it is available, and according to them, it is being mass-produced. As far as I can tell, Paraclete Energy has not made public which companies they are providing their anode material to, but they do list on a fact sheet that I found on their website that their current customers are EV and cell manufacturers. Now, I'm assuming that these EV and cell manufacturers are still in the evaluation stages of using this particular material. I don't believe that we actually have this new silicon anode technology in actual production batteries that are in electric vehicles or consumer electric devices that are available today. I don't believe that's the case, but this product is being commercialized and once again is being produced and very well could find its way into production batteries in the not too distant future. So with that being said, this is not some far off distant technology once again. This is something that is actually here today, and very likely we will see this technology find its way into production batteries very soon if it hasn't already. Now with that being said, let's talk a little bit about the technology itself. Silicon can store more lithium ions than graphite, and battery companies often use small amounts in their battery anodes to increase the charging speed and energy density of their batteries. However, silicon does expand quite a bit more than graphite during cell cycling, which leads to cracking in the anode material, short cycle life, and/or cell failure. Now, obviously, there are systems in place right now for production batteries to accommodate for this swelling, and battery companies are once again putting very small amounts of silicon in their batteries with systems that accommodate for this. However, the amount of silicon that is being added to these batteries is still quite small in general. Paraclete Energy's silo silicon, as they call it, should actually allow for much larger amounts of silicon in the anode while still having good battery lifetime, good cycle life. And their approach creates a polymer silicon matrix that increases the amount of silicon in each particle from around 12% from a typical carbon-based matrix to around 75% with their polymer silicon matrix. In addition, as I will discuss more about shortly, even in amounts as great as 15% of the anode by weight being silicon, the normal expected cracking that happens during volume expansion of silicon in high amounts in an anode doesn't appear to occur with Paraclete Energy's product, according to a finding published in a scientific paper. While this anode material appears to be cathode type agnostic and works just fine with high nickel cathodes, what really has me excited is the application of this anode technology with lithium iron phosphate batteries. And the reason behind that is because lithium iron phosphate batteries are already affordable and extremely safe. They're a technology that I get very excited about when it comes to batteries. Yes, they're not generally as energy dense, but with a technology like this, which increases the energy density of a battery, this can bring the energy density of an LFP battery up and the charging speed up and actually lower the cost even further. On Paraclete Energy's website, they specifically mention here that with an LFP battery pairing, this technology is able to achieve a cost per kilowatt hour of $35. This is a pretty good reduction from the number that they mention here, the average price of an LFP battery being $53 per kilowatt hour. When it comes to how this lower cost is achieved, I believe it comes down to two main factors. The first factor is there is a lower cost manufacturing method required to create the polymer matrix that Paraclete Energy uses to introduce their silicon, whereas the traditional way, the carbon matrix, requires a much more manufacturing intense method that I believe is much more expensive. The second factor that makes this lower cost per kilowatt hour possible comes down to just a natural result of raising the energy density of a battery cell. On Paraclete Energy's website, they specifically state that, quote, batteries made with silosilicon are 33% less expensive per kilowatt hour than traditional carbon-based products. They also specifically mention here that their silosilicon anode materials offer an impressive energy density over 520 watt-hours per kilogram. Of course, there is much more that influences the energy density of a battery cell beyond just the anode material. You have to keep in mind the cathode material, how the battery cell is constructed, how much inactive material is in that battery cell, how much it weighs, etc. But nonetheless, when it comes to the anode material, it is a very energy dense, great anode material that when put into batteries does raise the energy density of batteries. Now, I want to move beyond just these surface claims by the company, and I want to move to a study that was done by Argonne National Lab, and this was reported in this research paper here, which is linked on Paraclete Energy's website. As you can see here, the researchers in this particular test tested 3 different battery types. Each of these battery types, when it comes to the cathode, had nickel, manganese, cobalt, 811 cathodes. When it comes to the anode side, the anode of the first battery had 0% of Paraclete Energy silicon. The second battery had a 15% by weight Paraclete Energy silicon added to the anode. And the third had 30% by weight of Paraclete Energy silicon added to that anode. With that being said, when it comes to fast charging performance, results were given in this research paper for fast charging tests that they did to a rate of all the way up to 8C, which, as a reminder, 8C means fully charging a battery in 7.5 minutes. So that's a very fast charge rate. And you can see here the results they have here based on the capacity loss and the charging speed there. And they have A, the battery with 0% silicon in the anode, B, 15% silicon, C, 30% silicon. And you can see when it comes to capacity retention, the batteries with added silicon actually have much better capacity retention even after charging at a very high rate of 8C. In a test like this, I'm assuming that that rate is constant through the whole time. And so you're actually really abusing that battery. Typically speaking, when it comes to charging an electric vehicle, the battery management system is going to limit the charge rate to keep that battery from overcharging and causing problems like lithium plating. And what happens when charging, if you try to charge at too high of a kilowatt rate, you actually have lithium that tries to move too quickly into the anode material. And if it can't actually intercalate into that material, it starts plating on the surface of the anode, which means you actually lose lithium ions in that battery and thus lose battery capacity. So the reason why adding silicon to the battery anode actually helped with more capacity retention during fast charging is because silicon has more storage capacity for lithium ions than graphite anode materials, which also allows for the active anode material to be thinner for the same capacity as its graphite counterpart. If you have a thicker anode, that actually does affect how easily those lithium ions can actually intercalate into that material. Of course, since graphite can actually store less lithium ions than silicon can, you're able to make thinner anodes the more silicon you add, which makes the ability of those ions to actually, those lithium ions to get into that anode material easier. So with that in mind, this is actually supported by these findings where it's written here in this research paper, quote, "It is also important to note that these images show the minimum lithium deposits on the silicon-containing electrodes, while the 00Si, referring to the battery that had 0% silicon in the anode, showed significantly more lithium plating on the surface." And then once again, as I described, it's written here, quote, "This is most likely due to the electrode thickness variations besides the reduced overpotential with silicon discussed above." Now, when it comes to the specific thicknesses of these anodes, it was mentioned here specifically that the anodes with 0% silicon had a thickness of around 48 microns, which was about twice that of the other two anodes, which had thicknesses of between 22 and 27 microns. And once again, that anode material thickness is a big factor when it comes to the lithium plating performance. Now, with that being said, this research paper also dealt with the expansion issues with silicon. Of course, no matter what mechanism you put in place, there still is going to be expansion of silicon. You just have to actually build a system to mitigate the damage from that. So when it comes to the battery expansion results in this test, in this research paper, they wrote here specifically that for the 0% silicon anode, there was approximately a 12% irreversible increase in thickness after cycling. So even graphite does have some expansion that happens. When it comes to the 15% silicon anode, there was a 48% end-of-life swelling rate, and with the 30% silicon anode, after cycling resulted in a 36% swelling rate. I did find it interesting that the 30% silicon anode actually had a lower percentage of swelling versus the 15% battery. That is really interesting. But nonetheless, more importantly, when it comes to damage caused by this swelling, in their test, the 30% silicon anode coating did show cracks, and specifically here it's written, quote, which extend from the surface to the copper current collector. So obviously that's a bad thing, but with the 15% silicon anode, it's written here, quote, the 15Si anode shows no obvious particle boundaries and cracks throughout the depth, indicating that the graphite could buffer the volume changes in silicon and maintain the structural integrity of the electrode during cycling to some extent. So obviously this is just one test here, but I gather from this that having around 15% by weight of this silicon product in a battery may be kind of the sweet spot. It will increase the energy density of that battery cell quite a bit, but maybe still mitigate any of that damage that's caused by that swelling because, once again, that 15% silicon anode battery seemed to not have the same cracking as the 30%. So it looks like this Paraclete Energy product does work well, at least in this particular test, at mitigating the damage of silicon swelling. Now, when it comes to specific life cycle numbers for this battery technology, I didn't find specific numbers listed on their website, but they did link to an article that was published in this e-mobility engineering magazine. And specifically in that article, it was written, quote, our customers routinely achieve 1,000 cycles due to the conductive polymer matrix and the fact that the electrolyte is not consumed, Norris said. So being able to cycle a battery at least 1,000 times kind of seems to be really that benchmark that you need to hit. And so it's important that they appear to be hitting that, and that is a big key plus for this technology. With that being said, from what I can tell, this technology appears to be the real deal and appears to check the most important boxes. I do hope Paraclete Energy is successful at commercializing this product on a broader scale because I believe it will lower the cost and increase the range and charging performance of today's lithium-ion batteries in electric vehicles and help push forward the electrification of transportation. Do let me know what you think about this technology in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you. I'd also like to say thank you to all of those of you who support me through Patreon. Your support makes a big difference and does help make these videos possible. If you'd like to find out more about how you can support my work through Patreon, I will put a link in the video description. Thank you so much.